Thank you for tuning in to this virtual panel produced in partnership by Pilchuck Glass School and Koplin Del Rio Gallery. My name is Ben Wright. I'm the Artistic Director at Pilchuck. Today I'll be guiding a conversation on the role of public art with a supremely talented panel with a wealth of accumulated experience in this area. We've come together for this interesting topic at this time, first to acknowledge and promote a new stellar exhibition by the Torre Brothers, who are joining us today. Recently opened at Koplin Del Rio Gallery here in Seattle. And secondly, to examine what the role of public art is in this bizarre time where so few of us are actually in the public, and what long-term changes these experts view in that field moving forward. Let me start by introducing our panelists, after which they will each give a brief presentation of their work, and then we'll move into hopefully an organic conversation. Einar and Jamex de la Torre were born in Guadalajara, Mexico in the early 60s and moved with their family to the US in 1972. They both attended and studied studio art at the California State University at Long Beach in the early 80s, where they were introduced to glass as a creative material. Currently, the brothers live and work on both sides of the border, moving back and forth from their ranch in Guadalupe Valley and San Diego, California. The complexities of the immigrant experience and contradicting bicultural identities inform their narrative and aesthetics. The brothers have been collaborating in earnest since the 1990s and have developed their signature style featuring mixed media work with blown glass sculpture and installation art. They have had 18 solo museum exhibitions, and perhaps most relevant to this conversation, completed at least 8 major public art projects and have participated in 4 biennials. Welcome, Einar and Jamex. Our final panelist, Tommy Gregory, is a Seattle-based artist and is currently the Public Art Program Senior Manager and Curator for the Port of Seattle. He earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Houston in 2005 and his Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Texas at San Antonio in 2009. After graduate school, Gregory began a career in art administration as a public arts specialist for the city of San Antonio, moving from there to a role as Public Art Program Director and Curator for all 3 of the Houston airports. Most recently, in the new position at SeaTac and the Port of Seattle, Gregory oversees conservation commissions and acquisitions, as well as temporary art at SeaTac Airport. Not to overlook his own studio practices, as often happens with us administrators, Gregory's work ranges from bronze and glass sculptures to drawing and collage, combining humor with elegance of form. Gregory has exhibited professionally for almost 20 years with exhibitions at Blue Star Contemporary Art Museum in San Antonio, Texas, the Blaffer Gallery, and the Glasnell School of Art in Houston, Texas. His most recent public work is a permanent sculpture at the University of Houston. Welcome, Tommy. And now I think we should take a quick visual look at the work of these artists. Let's start with Einar, and then Tommy, you can follow directly after.
Great. Everybody can see that? Good. We, like Ben said, thank you for the kind introduction, Ben. We live and work in both San Diego, and our studio is in Baja California. It's about an hour south of the border. This is the studio we have recently built. This is from the outside. And let me see where to click next, because that didn't work. That's from the inside, that same tree. We're in an area with lots of oak trees, so that's very much part of our studio setting.
And this is brand new, yes, Einar?
Yeah, I think we've been, this first run for the show at Koplin Del Rio is the first run we've made. Here we are, mulling over a lenticular piece that with a blown glass inclusion on top of it. And in the background, that triangular panel is public art that we are doing for LA Metro station in Compton in Los Angeles. I'm going to go ahead and jump into images from the show at Koplin Del Rio. It'll be sort of rifle through these images so you can get an idea what that show looks like. Comics, maybe you could add in.
Yeah, it's a mixed media piece. Basically, mostly found objects, purchased objects put together and coded together.
So we wanted to show that we are also, we're known for glass and lenticular as of late, but also mixed media is really kind of the it casts over everything. We love materials and the use of materials. So yes, as in this piece, also the found objects, which is, I like to say, very well chosen objects, better than found, but there it is.
I think it's fair to say that we're first mixed media artists, and I think in some ways it helped us apply our artwork to public art, because public art always requires dexterity with many different mediums.
So this is blown glass scorpion, and then the base is cast resin, as is the little pin head on top with the face in it. We do a bit of casting in resin because you can put inclusions in it. And the bottom are purchased polished glass diamonds.
A little demo sculpture with an attachment of a cut off brontosaurus head in his front. I don't know if you can see that. He's sort of like a Sesame Street devil.
This is a figure, again, the bed of roses is cast resin. My brother is quite good at casting the inclusions in resin. The blown glass, the head is blown glass, and the body of the baby is probably from display at a store from maybe mid-century or something. We named this one 2020 with exclamation marks because we felt that the baby that is 2020 was coming with a vengeance. Let's see what hindsight's like.
This is titled The Catholic Kings, blown glass piece invested into a ceramic jar. Basically coming out from a pool of milk.
And the idea here was that the indigenous were getting of the Americas, so all the gold got stolen and taken to Spain. So hence the title, The Catholic Kings. Like, is all the gold never enough? By the way, the ceramic base, the terracotta piece below, we made in a residency at Pottery Northwest in Seattle.
This was titled Recurring Dream, a large blown glass piece. What is it, a good 2 feet high, I think, with a large resin base block in the bottom.
Yeah, and the chain is invested in the resin and then attaches to the toy. So it's sort of negating the idea of being able to pull the pull toy. And again, we felt that Recurring Dreams had these sort of themes from our childhood, sometimes being locked in and not being able to move, even though it's a joyous device. It's got all kinds of mixed things that dreams always seem to be scattered in that way. And so these figures that are little animals, we named them the tonali, or your animal kind of spirit. So in this one, it's we call it the carrot and the stick, because there's sort of baby Jesus is being born in eggs down below, and the whole idea of Easter being mixed up with Christianity has always been a very complex and not necessarily easy to understand. So we're trying to explain things with our work.
This is the Lord of the Flies. Funny little piece. It's Potus, Lord of the Flies, right? I know the complete.
Post-Potus.
Post-Potus.
Yeah. So POS, Potus.
Because we do have a present that's very much like a Lord of the Flies.
So the background of this is LEDs. They light up. It's like a disco scene all over. And the girls down below are quinceañeras, or a sort of debutantes. So now onto the brand new lenticular work we made for the exhibition. This is called White Privilege. The lenticulars are hard to photograph in that you have to move sideways to see both images, but you get an idea of a little bit of both images on this. And of course, we're making new water jet cut frames for these that are casting wonderful shadows onto the wall. The image by itself of the lenticular in the middle, that's framed in gold, is pretty much 2 feet high by 4 feet wide, to give you an idea of the image, of the size of this. So the whole piece is a good 4 feet high by 5.5 feet. I mean, 4.5 feet wide by 5 feet wide by 4.5 feet tall.
Another lenticular panel, choose your poison. The lenticular panels are only 1/4 of an inch thick, but they give this incredible 3D effect that literally looks like there's at least 1.5 feet of space coming forward and coming backwards.
This is slightly larger. This is about 6 feet wide by 5 feet tall. It's a piece that we made for an exhibition having to do with science and art mixed together. We work with a scientist from the Salk Institute specializing in the studies of the mitochondria, and we call this Miss Mito because of the mitochondria being the sort of energy machine for all life, animal and flora and fauna, but it's also linked to how we age and the ravages of time. So there's a wonderful duality that we learned about working with this scientist, top-rate scientist that there are at the Salk Institute. In fact, the water jet cut outline on the edges is sort of the mitochondria texture going all the way around it, and there's much content in it. So these lenticulars, since they have depth and a double image that moves as you walk by them, have a tremendous amount of content as you study that cannot be shown in a two-dimensional image.
Just to explain to you, if you are present in front of this lenticular piece, this egg shape that you see actually looks dimensional, completely dimensional.
Yeah, but almost let's say 20 inches of perceived depth, even though it's a flat image. It's the lens that gives it that quality. And so this is the guys that cut a water jet cut of the last piece that I'm going to show you to give you an idea. Very much a shop photo. And that's that frame once we finish it. So this piece is like almost 7 feet tall with the frame, and the frame giving those wonderful textures on the wall. And this piece is a very, very complicated piece that shifts from a female Buddhist image to this image of the liberator of Belgium, surrounded by women. It's called Feminencia, or Feminines. We wanted to speak about the eminence of females and female power, and hopefully how much that has to do with the future of our world if we are to survive. We're going to shift now to public art. Older work. This is from 2014, I believe, 15. It's a 16-foot robot in San Diego, made of steel, and the pink that you see is hand-carved cantera stone glyphs, very much in the Mayan style of glyphs.
Yeah, we wanted to show an absurd dichotomy in the last piece, the beautiful steel robot, a 1960s robot with actual hand-carved stone inset into him. So the old and the new in this Barrio Logan, this Mexican-American neighborhood in San Diego. And
project, we did 5 pieces for a hospital in Los Angeles, finished a couple of years ago. This is in the lobby of the Wellness Center in Rancho Los Amigos, National Rehabilitation Center in Downey, California, part of the greater LA basin. This is a lenticular 10-foot mandala that shifts as you walk by. the clients see some clients that go there every day for therapy see it every day. So it's wonderful. When we were there, we were told how people go by every day and see something new. There's a lot of sort of discovery happening on the lenticular pieces that we enjoy that about them in public art, because since they're permanent installations, they do get viewed over and over, and it's nice when they tell you that they still get a lot out of it, even though they're seeing it on a daily basis. And those are some clients for that center in the background.
Another piece for the same project, hand-carved cantera stone piece with glazed ceramic flowers.
We made up a waiting room piece. It's kind of and set into the wall, and it's kind of an aquarium. Those are blown glass fishes, fantastical blown glass fishes, and some plants. There's some resin castings as well. And the background in this aquarium is a lenticular that also shifts. So there's movement, even though everything is really quite still. The movement is by you moving by it, things change a little bit and shift. The way that those fishes are floating is that we have a thick piece of acrylic where they're adhered to, floating in between the front glass and the back lenticular.
And this is the largest lenticular panel we've done to date, 20 feet high. And as you can see, we had to collaborate with the architects, the builders, and the engineers to produce this piece, as well as electricians and glass installers. So that's what entails to produce a big piece for a public art project. At the same time, we were able to put a really large piece at a public space.
And we also made a 21-foot tall tree of life, hand-carved cantera stone on a steel structure with ceramic flowers all over it. Since it's a rehab hospital, it's very much about spinal injury. So we love the way that the tree of life was very reminiscent of a spinal column in a human and the kind of rib cage area. In fact, those sort of tendrils in the middle are the nerves coming out of the spine. And we wanted to speak about this very graphically. At the bottom, the sort of Mayan kind of imagery alludes a little bit to they also work with prosthetics in this hospital, and the whole melding of machinery and man.
Very complicated piece to produce. It has a massive stainless steel skeleton inside, and all the ceramic flowers are attached directly to that skeleton to coordinate the different materials. Was a pretty tricky endeavor.
Recently finished, just last year, a new library down in San Isidro, which is the town that's adjacent to Tijuana in the United States. Those are water jet cut steel panels that are very much done in papel picado style. Here is one of them in particular, and here is the other. You can see the shadows that they cast as the light moves through them along the day. The papel picado is the paper cuttings that they've cut all together and then unfold and display in parties and festivals in central and southern Mexico.
And the second part of the same project in the San Isidro Library is this entrance arch into the library. We made the columns on the sides, 13 feet high, with lenticular panels on 4 sides, and hand-carved cantera stone on top.
And lastly, this is what we're working on right now, is these parasols. That's our guy that manufactures this water jet cut steel also makes trucks for the Baja 500 races. And so it's an interesting dichotomy. But they're turning out to be great fabricators for the arts. And that is aluminum that's water jet cut, since they are going to be going in on the Rosa Parks station in Watts, in LA, Compton, Watts area. We have in this one, for instance, the Black Power fist on it. Kind of the cutout. We also have an image of Rosa Parks in the one in the background. That is, you could barely see it, but it's the mugshot. Very important. They wanted us to get somewhat political. So there's two of each one of these, and there's two other ones that have an image that is like the Black Panther image. So it was very refreshing to be able to get somewhat political in public art, since that's usually a taboo or a no-no. And here, lastly, to give you a sense of scale, we're testing the lighting underneath them, and with the lighting designers, and you start getting a little bit of the idea of what 14 feet looks like, because that's a 14-foot one up in the air.
It's a good picture because it shows you how in public art you need to collaborate with fabricators to figure out how to produce a work. And I think your artistic vision is your artistic vision, but they always have a much better idea how to put things together. And you need to listen to them. They helped us tremendously in developing the whole structure, and not only the structure, but also how these things going to be transported and put together. And they always explain to you how certain little things are more cost effective or more efficient. And you can imagine the things that they come up with. You need a good collaboration with fabricators.
And since it's a glass school, I'm going to end with this slide, but those round holes that are in the panels that you see up there will have those diamonds, the polished diamonds in them. So not only will you see the pattern of the water jet on the ground as the sun moves across the day, but those little round holes that are 4-inch diamonds will also be refracting light onto the passersby. Since it is a pretty rough area, the Compton Watts area, we really wanted to make a very beautiful, very feminine, lacy parasols. There's going to be 6 of these, by the way, with a slight angle so that they look like a second line. In fact, that's the name of the piece, will be the second line. And with that, we are going to end our presentation.
Thanks, guys. That was excellent. You guys, in terms of content and process, we'll dig a little bit deeper, but you guys hit upon a lot of the topics we hope to cover in that conversation. It's great to see how busy you guys have been. Lots of new work even since the last time I checked in with you guys. Tommy?
Strangely that we're so busy entering into very uncertain economic times. We feel very lucky indeed. Yeah.
Lots of new projects there. I mean, that was pretty much, in terms of the public art, all dated from 2014 on. Is that right?
Yeah, we have projects all the way back to 99.
To 99, right. So, great. Thanks, guys. Go along. Tommy, do you...
Well, thanks. It's to say it's a great panel to be on. I've admired the brothers' work for a long time, and Ben and everything Pilchuck does is it just resonates throughout the country. So it's good to be a part of this group and talk about public art, especially in a time right now where the definition of that, I think, is going to change. There's going to be a post-COVID era. So to start with mine, I was going to start with some of my studio work and how I began in the arts. So I like what the brothers started with, saying they're not found objects, but I can't remember how you say it, Einar, like well curated objects, or
chosen.
Yeah. Well chosen objects. So I started off very modest. I always knew I was going to be in the arts. I don't think there was anything I was ever interested in outside of it to a certain degree. So when I got into the University of Houston program, I struggled to pay for it, having multiple jobs, and I worked with what I could. So I worked with objects that I felt like had some formal qualities, but also the best part of it is that they were free. So I worked with a lot of found wood pieces and a lot of pieces that I just found in the urban jungle of Houston. So this was actually one I didn't find in Houston. This was at my grandfather's land in Bastrop, Texas, and it was just a simple broken twig. And I did my first cast bronze piece out of that, just to kind of memorialize that a little bit of the land, but also the form. And you'll see in some of the other pieces, form mattered a lot. So these were pieces I started making. I want to say I think these were both while in graduate school at the University of Texas in San Antonio. So the first one is Method for Appreciating a Rock. That rock I actually found on a drive from Eugene, Oregon to Austin, where I was helping an artist friend move their studio from Oregon to Texas. And I found that stone, and I picked it up on a, not to be crude, but like on a little piss break on a long drive. And I just loved that stone. I grabbed it and I held it for, because I probably held it for 3 years before I found out I wanted to put it into a kind of a minimalist presentation. So I called that Method for Appreciating a Rock. Just a hook and eye drilled into this black stone. The other one was a study where I would find wood pieces where I didn't have the funds at the time to cast anything in bronze. So I would just go to Home Depot or Lowe's, a local hardware store, buy some like poplar, some easy stock that I could carve, and then find things that were around the shop and combine them. So this is a study with found and purchased wood, number 7. So kind of going a little bit back, because this was pre-graduate school. This picture was taken in 2004, I believe, where I was, my first serious introduction to public art, and working with a major, in my opinion, and hopefully many others, a major public artist, Latino public artist, Luis Jimenez, on his monumental sculpture at Denver International Airport called Mustang, simply titled Mustang. This was us kind of posing in front of the head. He hated posing in front of art, so I don't think he was happy about this one. But I was just so excited to be a studio assistant to him. He was a tenured professor at University of Houston, but he would travel between his studio in Hondo, New Mexico, and back to Houston to teach. And I was in his class, and I was just really lucky that he saw something in me that made him want to bring me to work with him. So I cherish all those times working with Luis, and that was my serious intro into public art. Good artists I've worked with, but anyway, this was a turning point in my, my psyche of what art could be. So the next slide would show work in the post-grad era. Not getting into my own public art yet. I think I was still, again, looking at this and struggling with, like most young artists at the time, struggling with being able to work with materials that you have access to. So this is kind of some bought and some reclaimed wood, where I was really into how we are leaving our footprint on the planet. But anyway, I won't go into the concept of it so much as it's a wooden fireplace. So it's a fireplace like a match you could use once and it goes away. But a lot of carving and wood assemblage for a one-night fire. But I feel like it was a title was fitting, disposable era. So the next slide is a similar piece. It's meant to be very allude to strength, but it's a column made completely out of cheap dollar store toilet paper. So again, working with affordable materials and trying to make something big. And I've had an exhibit at the University of Texas Permian Basin, which is far out from where I was at the time. And I wanted to make a big piece, and I wanted to find out how to transport it in a compact fashion. And all I had to do was have some metal rings I rolled and welded together, suspended from the ceiling, and then just attach a toilet paper, and I had a 12-foot tall piece. But anyway, I also like the vein that it worked with in some of my other pieces, like the disposable era piece. This one was called Temporary Comfort. The next slide gets into my first glass pieces. So I know working with Pilchuck, we got to focus on some glass. I hope that people will be, this is my first entry into it. So I was, it's simply optic glass, but that is diamond cut. So I made a DXF file and was screenshotting Facebook quotes and immortalizing them into these kind of heirlooms, that because nobody could really pass your iPhone to your children as their planned obsolescence, but this was one that could be passed through family generations. Next slide shows a few more glass pieces. I started getting into neon by working with Kathy Cunningham Little and Ken Little in San Antonio, and they taught me the craft. And then in Houston, I worked with a brilliant neon artist named Tim Walker, who helped me build these two. So these are animated neons, so they turn like the loading sign on your phone, and they're on metal bases that I patinaed. The first one is the pink is from, I don't know if y'all might know, I don't know if they have Taco Cabana in South California, do they? Okay, it's a Texas thing, I guess. But the neon color that they use on their sign I thought was interesting, because there's like this drive-through waiting line and you're waiting for Jesus to come back. I kind of like that. And then the other one is just the loading sign. So actually the second one to the right of the cross, the crucifix piece, came before that one. The loading sign came first, and then the crucifix. So sorry, trying to stay with time and not get too into concepts. The next slide shows my big topic for our conversation today is public art, and my experience in public art administration, but also conservation. So when I was public art administrator in San Antonio, Houston, now here in Seattle, my goal is take care of the collection I inherit. So not a lot of people, everybody's always excited to spend money on new pieces, and that is important, I think, to collect and have relevant public art collections, but also take care of the stuff you have. So this was just a couple slides showing some imagery of my conservation projects. The next one is the next slide shows a major piece that I undertook, not because I wanted to. The center column of these three 60-foot plus tall fountains by Dennis Oppenheim, the late Dennis Oppenheim, was hit by a car. So in the slide you see, I shouldn't laugh, it was a tragic accident actually, but this major road at Bush Intercontinental Airport, somebody lost control of the vehicle and went into the center tower, the one you see in that photo, and that's what we have disassembled. So we had to strip all the LEDs off of that piece and do some substantial stainless steel fabrication on site and rebuild that tower, wrap it in LEDs and get it to be synced with the other two towers. And there was a push for that because, like most public art, the brothers will let you know, is that there's timeline's not always for any particular reason. This one was to meet the Super Bowl that was coming to the city at the time. So a really rushed project that we successfully accomplished. Along with public art conservation, I'm really focused on temporary projects. So the next ones you'll see, I'm sorry, this slide actually shows, that's fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this slide shows another part of that. Before you can get into other the meat of public art, you need to fund it. So I'm a very vocal advocate in trying to push for more funding because you can look around the country, and I think that some of it is window dressing. The way different entities might support the public arts. It's great that we have the percentages, but I think we need to come to the 21st century as far as what things cost to build and what artists' time is worth. So this is just a slide of me in my new role here in Seattle, making a proposal to increase or return our budget for CIP, which is Capital Improvement Project budget, to 1%, and we successfully did that. So next slide shows the temporary art part. So the curatorial side of the job. On the left is an artist named Joanne Fleischauer, and she made basically a light box out of these really high quality vinyl pieces that are in a window. And if I had another slide to show you, but those windows are about 8 foot tall. So those are very giant windows in a defunct air traffic control tower. First time it's ever been done in the country to reuse a defunct air traffic control tower for a temporary art installation. On the right, I love using old structures to let artists basically do what they want in them. And on the right is Jessica Stockholder, based in Chicago. We had these empty silos, so you can't see, but that's the ceiling disappears because it's 85 feet tall, and we had to drop her artwork from in a ridiculous height and suspend it to her liking. But I love giving artists the opportunities from a curatorial standpoint to work with the space, and these two pieces I feel like did exactly what they should do. The next slide shows one of a recent piece here at SeaTac International, Seattle Tacoma International Airport, and this is the Red Sand project by artist Molly Gotchman out of New York, where we did a piece trying to push the boundaries of what outdoor temporary political art could be. In a city like this, I feel like we should push some political boundaries because we're allowed to. We have the support to. We have the tolerance here. So this is the southern border of the United States in red sand. And it was happening around the time, or at least our concept happened. We installed this back in 2019 of last summer, a year ago. But anyway, it's the Mexican border, and it's talking about human trafficking and the way our policies are basically really making it easy for people to traffic human beings to and fro. You know, and the border is such an imaginary line. It's just super elegant as a piece. Most people don't know what they're looking at. They just see this laser red thing from like the light rails you can see right there, or from a plane or helicopter, wherever they may be. But I thought that was a successful temporary art piece. Next slide shows some more of my work. I want to just close with some more recent pieces. And talking about political art, I hope we discuss that in this panel. Is it's very much needed. And even though this is like kind of a minimalist version, it does have some loaded content in it. Some of my work has religious inspiration, and this is a bronze condom, polished, and kind of. I'm doing a lot of bronze work that's of course a small scale right now because my studio reduction during the coronavirus era. But the next slide will show another piece talking about political nature and trying to work small with materials we have. This is my first attempt at sewing, and it's just a split American flag with a zipper sewn into it. So depending on where we're at, I feel like that zipper is an interesting little interactive element to the American flag because we're in very divided times. But that concludes my part.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome, and I think it's always useful to have a visual look before we launch into a conversation to see where everybody's coming from. Why don't we start with the Dewas, and Einar, Jamex, jump in, whoever feels moved to speak. But let's just start with the broadest sense. What roles do you see art playing in public spaces? And not to date anybody, but as you mentioned, you've been working for decades in this realm. How do you feel that role has changed over time, or do you feel that role has changed?
Well, I think that we're seeing more of the temporary pieces that Tommy was talking about here, also with the San Diego Commission for the Arts. I think that's a good thing because one of the interesting problematics of permanent artwork is that only in the last maybe couple of decades are they really talking about the fact that permanent works aren't permanent, and that buildings have a life, and that all of that discussion I find very interesting because they always want, everybody wants bulletproof art for their collection, but at the same, what is bulletproof? And if you take a hammer to anything, you can dent bronze. You can, so the idea of permanence is more questioned, and I don't think that's a problem because often public art is like they want it to be bulletproof, but and as low maintenance as possible. But hardly any another relatively new things is that places are worried about the conservation, because for a long time pieces were abandoned. It's like they spend a lot of money on something and walk away from it, and not even the light bulbs were changed, much less a water, a pressure hose or any maintenance. And I think that all of these things are slowly changing and getting better as they realize that it's silly to do all this effort and then just sort of walk away. So that's one thing that I think I've seen change. And the other is that Tommy also alluded to, is the fact that the political angle is starting to get touched on more. And I think for a long time, it was like a complete taboo, run away, we can't say anything. And of course, nobody wanted to say it, but it was come decorate our building,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely want to dive into content a bit later, but maybe Tommy, maybe you can build on that by describing the effects that this pandemic has had on the public art projects you're involved with, and you alluded to sort of a post-COVID era. What, if any, do you see the long-term effects of this being?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into those. To me, there's twofold, because I wanted to tack on what Einar mentioned when the governance of the public art programs, the people who I report to, they do in a lot of ways demand that public art be maintenance free or conservation free when nothing else in the facility is. So it's it's just a ridiculous thing to ask. And I think it's because there's a longer story to that, but public art in this country is still in its infant stages. I don't think people know how to handle it. I don't think it's been administered correctly. For a number of the early years, I think it was kind of like the Wild West, where it's like, I like that, let's get it. And I'm speaking definitely in Texas with that that kind of mentality. But yeah, I think that having the administrators, Ben, you know this, like ourselves, to be able to chime in with from a perspective that other folks might not have had, I think is helping public art and public artists in the future. But the COVID era, and forgive me if I'm not, remind me of the question so I answer it correctly. I'm sorry.
Well, just how has it affected you in the immediate sense in the projects you're working on, but then also you made an allusion to sort of a post-COVID era, and I was wondering what you see as the long-term effects.
So luckily, I have a very good, here in Seattle, we have a very good board of our public art board, and they are very understanding that these tough times should not be a knee-jerk reaction to cut the arts again, because that's what happened in the recession in 2008. Our percentage reduced because there was an economic downturn in the country, and the first thing to go was the CIP budgets, and the art program itself was not well supported, which my findings upon taking this job led to a certain level of neglect, where you walk through and not only pieces dusty to a ridiculous degree, they're also not, there's light conservation damage that had been compounded from neglect because they didn't have the funding or support to take care of it. So I was able and very fortunate to come into the position and work with a board that would accept a proposal of mine to not reduce funding, because that's the first thing that everybody want to do is cut the arts, and they've all said, yeah, we've learned from our past mistake, we're not going to do that again. But it's still really tough because we're dependent on CIP projects, which for the most part are still ongoing. Construction projects that were approved that are happening over the next few years will put in their 1% for the arts. But what is art like? How, if the airport or the maritime aspects from the cruise terminal standpoint, people don't start cruising again or traveling to a comfortable level that they were pre-COVID era, we have to adapt. And where I think public art is extremely important, even more so now, is that if people aren't going into these buildings, what the Torre Brothers have done is they've made some amazing exterior pieces that people from a social distancing standpoint could go and get some visual culture, because we don't have museums open to our, like, to just run into on a Saturday morning anymore. And it's affecting not only art lovers, but I think it's affecting people on a number of levels from a human standpoint. We need those things to be around objects that were made by human beings to remind us of our culture and our fragility. And we have such a short memory. I'm afraid that the COVID era, what I think should happen is there should start being memorial dedications or sculptural installations happening now to commemorate the time we're living in, so we don't forget what, we'll be lucky to be able to put it in the back of our mind, hopefully one day soon, but we shouldn't forget that we need your neighbor to survive. We need somebody at a grocery store. We need somebody in a service industry, and public art does that, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Can I butt in a little bit?
Yeah, please do.
Right on. I so concur with what you just expressed, Tommy. We have to remind ourselves that these are completely unprecedented times. It sure feels like we're at the precipice of humanity, and maybe not. Maybe we will just forget everything, and in 2 years everything is back to normal. But it is a weird proposition to say that I'm going to spend a gigantic ton of money to produce this artwork that's going to last 100 years when humanity should be preoccupied with the next 15. It's and having said that, because that is kind of the hyper-real reality of how we have to deal. Art is there to help us get through and to help us reflect and mirror what is going on in our lives as humanity, to reconsider, is necessary, especially necessary in these times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more, I think. And the idea of exterior art is something I hadn't really considered in the reality that we can't access all of our ways of experiencing art have largely been geared towards interior spaces throughout well, at least recent history anyways. So that's an aspect I really hadn't considered. If we can move on, let's sort of delve into the content that I think everybody has sort of hinted at from time to time. And I'll start with Einar and Jamex. As you mentioned and clearly showed in your presentation, your work doesn't shy away from addressing political and social issues in your work, but public art historically until quite recently has strived to offend no one. So do you think there are any advantages to the content of your work that have, you mentioned the Rosa Parks project, but what are also the hazards of including sort of cultural, political, religious content in public art? Do you approach the content of your public work differently than your gallery-based work?
Yes, we do. You have to. There's no question that there's hugely limiting factors in trying to get art through a committee. But at the same time, it's a gigantic opportunity. You are putting it in people's lives. Right? The piece that we're trying to put in Compton Watts right now is for people that are very, very unlikely to ever go to a museum. So you're just simply accessing the mass populace. And you don't do that in a gallery and a museum. In this country, very few people go to museums. So in that sense, it's a pretty wonderful opportunity to think what the people that you can reach with a single piece.
Yeah, if I might add too, I think that something we tell students an awful lot is that public art isn't for everybody. It's hard enough, I think, to be in your own head and convince yourself of what you think you should be doing, and then follow through and do it as an artist. That already is fairly tall order and complicated just to deal with yourself. I think that dealing with public art, you have to like dealing with other people. With our dad was an architect. We saw blueprints since we were babies. And we understood the idea. Obviously, we're collaborators as brothers, and that goes a long way into collaborating with an engineer or with an architect, or talking at a panel into the fact that you not only do you have a good idea, but you can actually pull it off. But having said that, making any art in any situation is a set of constraints. Whether it's your schoolwork in your schools that has constraints, whether it's your studio, the size of your constraints. We used to joke that when we were, very starving artist situation that we had for so many years, that we made work that fit into our van, and that was it. That was the constraint. Anything bigger, we'd have to hire a truck. It was outlandish sounding until we finally got a project that paid for not only making it, but also shipping. We were, just in heaven that we could think outside of the box. That was our van. And I'm using that as an example that we're always working with constraints. Very famously, painters say, well, since I didn't have this color, I use the other color, and that's why this whole set of work looks this way, because I ran out of black. I mean, it's kind of a trite example because it's so often used in the art, lingo, and but it's true. If you have less things to choose, you're going to be very creative with the things that you do have, and that is rather your job. And the same thing in a public art constraint. Those constraints are a world of possibilities still. But if you see them as constraints, then you're just seeing what you can't do. And, that is really kind of like the opposite of the mindset that you need to have. In other words, I've also heard students say, well, there's all this public art that they don't like. I said, well, then make some good public art. That's your challenge. Go do it. You figure it out and go do it. But stop complaining about it, because it's certainly, it's certainly easy to be, armchair, quarterback kind of thing, and say, I would have done it this way.
I'd like to add to that. Uh, Public art always has directives that you have to address, unless you're a big, fat, blue chip artist that you can do whatever you want and just say, I want to do this and that's that. You have to address the directives. At the same time, you as an artist have to figure out, what is it that I can get away with? Can I stick this in there?
Yeah.
Maybe nobody will notice or whatever. We managed to put the Black Power fist in the umbrellas that we're doing for Compton, and we feel very good about that. They're there. They're going to be reflected on the ground, and there are little things like that that can make your day in getting through all the steps in public art.
Well, and to me, that's what makes, like, the public word is obvious. The art word to a lot of people is not. That's what makes it art. When there's something that has an emotive, it makes you think, it provokes thought. And that in the United States, I could only speak to, because in Europe and in South America and Central America, I've seen better work. Better meaning that is really pushing you and challenging the viewer. There's been too many years. I mean, doing my research from the late 80s into the early thousands is that public art was design enhancement. It was people who didn't want to ruffle any feathers, but wanted to put something pretty that they could cut a ribbon in front of. And there's a lot of work that we're having to, or what's the word? We're just having to suck it up visually, that is snuck through the cracks and poses itself as art to the public. And I think it's really hurt people, because it isn't bad public art, like you were saying, Einar. It's out there for sure. Good public art is too. It's just, for some reason, good public art is harder to get through the administrative barriers. And I like to think that I'm an administrator who cuts those barriers for the artists so they can make their work. And in that you get more enlightened political officials, elected officials, because they are seeing things that, how are people going to ever see a masterpiece in public art if every single public art comes with a million boxes you have to check? It's so micromanaged. You have to eliminate those and let the artists make their work. But one last thought, because when you were talking about the fabricators you worked with, and there was I think that one of them was also somebody who builds trucks. So to me, that's really amazing, is whether it's a glass artist looking for somebody else to help create fabricate a structure or a substrate to hold your glass work or your bronze work or your aluminum work. If you're working with these folks and I've worked with a number of construction specialists who will never set foot in a museum, but you should see like a light bulb go off in their head, or a glimmer in their eye when they work with an artist and they see the world differently. So what y'all do when y'all work, like, public art also hits people in that way. It's almost like art appreciation for, like, roughnecks. They get to see, like, oh my God, this, maybe I don't hate Latinos anymore because I get to work with these folks, or maybe I understand the Black Power movement more because of my experience in these public art pieces.
Yeah, I concur with you on that. I mean, the fabricators we're working with are thrilled to be working on art, and then they see it go up, and quite honestly, they're flabbergasted that somebody could have a vision, an idea of what to make, and they know how to help you make it, and then it's up, and it's like, it's almost magical compared to the world that is, their normal everyday fabricating for, like in this case, race vehicles. We're very lucky to be working with them, and they're working really hard to learn new processes to be able to make artwork with us, for us. So I agree. I think that all art opens things up. It's maybe not the best soapbox for political change, but it is an important part of political change. It's a better way to put it. It is not we were asked that in Pilchuck, of all places, by a student who wanted artwork to just be this political platform, and we thought, no, well, politics is the political platform. Artwork is part of the change that's happening, and an intrinsic, completely part of its times, and it should be on the forefront. And yes, but it is not, it is not the change. It's part of change.
Well, let's dive into that relationship with fabricators a little more, but I'm interested in how, especially having hung out with you guys a little bit how that's changed your role as what it means to be the artist. From, clearly from the pictures from Koplin Del Rio, you're still very hands-on in aspects of the studio, but I also know how much time you spend on the computer, organizing the lenticulars and communications with all these fabricators. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the sort of satisfactions or frustrations of that are, but also what skill sets you feel like are really crucial to enter this arena in this day and age on the scale that you guys are working.
I think relationship with fabricators is a long-term relationship that goes both ways as a learning process. And in the beginning, we were basically making the models and getting fabricated, but now we proceed differently. Right now, we consult with them firstly to figure out an approach. But like we were saying earlier, you're working with this blue-collar guys. That is exciting, but it's not easy to find them. Once you talk to somebody and you tell them about the project and you see that glimmer in the eye about basically because they enjoy the challenge, you have somebody there. And you can have a relationship for years that just develops. And like I said, it's a learning process that goes both ways. You can learn a lot from them.
Yeah. And if I could add something real quick, I think you mentioned, Ben, as to how it's changed. I do think that, age and maybe have more projects under our belt and all of that, it changes you. And I do believe that we're more comfortable with farming out aspects of our work so that we can be more liberated to be more, do the creative part. In other words, I'd love it if I have less worries about an engineer talking to the project manager and leave me out of that conversation, because otherwise I'm going to say, that's great that we need that kind of steel with that kind of, tensile strength to hold that piece up. But I care about it. I care about the fact that it won't fall off and it won't hurt anybody. But more than that, I don't really need to know details and parameters. And I think we've learned to sort of push the right people to talk to the other people and be less involved in every single thing. And of course, that also means having more things done for you. And I think that, again, if you have trust and you have a good relationship, you can surrender some stuff so that what you should be doing is the more of the creative. We can take another project on instead of being more micromanaging every single project.
It was Ben. I was gonna chime one little comment on that from an administrator's side. Was I remember working early days of public art. There was an artist named Katie Pell, and I really liked working with her. She was brilliant, and it was on a San Antonio project, and she didn't show up to one of the meetings, and she sent somebody, and I was like, kind of for a moment, I was like, oh, she's just not interested in this phase. And later on, I realized exactly what you said, Einar, and she's like, no, she's like, I was useless in that phase. I needed the architect or the engineer, whoever it was at that time, to chime in. And I had that. I didn't actually realize that during the Katie Pell project. I learned it in Houston when I was working with Donald Lipsky, when he sent a project manager. And then I realized, yeah, this guy's doing like 10 other projects, and he's trying to stay creative and keep the focus on the most important aspect of those projects, getting more projects and also successfully seeing them to the public, so the public sees real art. So he would send a project manager who knew the logistics of the fabrication, transportation, and installation phases. So it took a little time for me to realize that it's not a bad thing to relieve yourself of some of those. But again, like Jamex said, is you have to develop those relationships and build them, so that way there's some it's like a symbiotic relationship where y'all could kind of like finish each other's sentences in a way.
Yeah, a lot of the art world, I think, has even relationship with galleries. You can write contracts all you want, but most of it is just trust. Yeah. And trust is really still the major component in all of these relationships. It's both wonderful and frustrating, but it's wonderful because when you do get the right people, you build on that. And until you do, there may be some hardships and some hard moments where things didn't go right. But as you get the right team going, you feel more you feel you have a lot more confidence in doing and what you can do, and therefore doing the jobs you want to take on.
Well, looking back from where you guys are now and the scale that you're working now, maybe for young artists who might be interested in entering this field or this way of working, and this can go out to any of the three of you for sure. How does one begin? How do you tackle your first project? Or, do you have any words of advice for young artists who might be interested in entering the field?
I think Tommy touched into this. His experience with Luis Jimenez seems to have been key in him delving into public art to begin with and understanding the process. We did something similar with Thurman Statham. We participated in his studio in different forms, but the important thing is that we witnessed all the things that he had to go, not just as a public artist, but as an artist running a studio with employees. And it's a sort of an apprenticeship. That would be my biggest recommendation. When we got our first project, the first thing we did was we consulted at length with him and another artist doing public artworks in the LA area. And you learn a lot because it's a lot of steps, and it's pretty daunting when you're beginning to break into that. I think it feels like getting into your first public art project feels like an interesting problematic. All the good projects require you to have experience, and you have to go through a lot of hoops to finally land a good one.
Well, it's from a public artist standpoint, I do know it's daunting to see that, and a little bit intimidating when you look at an open call that says 5 years experience. From my standpoint, I don't pick the art directly because of the way the funding comes in. It has to be an open process, but I do get to work closely with the selection panels, and I always remind them what experience can be, because I got my experience, casting resin and building forms with Luis Jimenez, or with Paul Kittleson, or other artists that helped me cut my teeth and learn not only the mental side of trying to engage a space, but also, and what materials you use, but also that understanding of the bureaucratic side of public art. It's difficult, and it's not for every artist. But I think that definitely to recommend to an aspiring public artist, go work with somebody in a studio, work with the brothers, and learn. There you are, masters of many materials. I think that the lenticulars are brilliant in the way that you create space that doesn't exist, because real estate is very valuable at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and to give depth in the illusion of just experiential space, that's a great use of materials. Very successful.
Thank you. I would add too quickly is that many programs around the country have a starter projects. And what I mean by that is that it definitely would be daunting if your first project is a big project and you don't have experience. Well, sure, that's almost, but I know that San Diego does. I imagine there's similar things in Seattle where they have, all projects that are practically, very accessible on a starting level. And it is all art, after all, in terms of career, is about setting precedent and building upon that, and getting bigger and better as you go, if that's a path you choose to take. But San Diego had a project where there was these pieces put on the harbor side temporarily, and then the city might go ahead and purchase the ones that passed the whatever criteria they wanted. And it was a nice way of saying, here's some temporary spaces, put some stuff in there, and people are getting their start that way. And I think that again, I think I've seen that more and more across the country, because there is such a big divide. And another thing that needs to be said about public art is that we also, Comics and I noticed that some public art commissions seem to be somewhat like jaded by the very, very glossy public artists that are doing that have a lot of projects all the time, because very often they have the machinery, they can go ahead and do the fly-through simulations of the work, but after all, it looks like what they did in Wisconsin, or they look kind of like, it's their versions with slight changes of what they're already making in other cities. And there is something to be said for, in fact, we declare ourselves as artists who also do public art on purpose, because our studio practice informs our public artwork. And it has to us, that's the hierarchy of it, is that our studio work is the foundation of how we work, as opposed to the other way around.
Although it does seem with the watercat frames and stuff that the public art is starting to feed back into the studio practice.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, good observation. Yes.
And I think it should, for us, it should be that way, that because it's all about better use of materials, and also relegating, like in this case, having them made. It costs more money, but then we have a beautiful thing done, as opposed to us spending money making frames when we really want to showcase the artwork in the middle anyway. Not that we didn't intervene them. We intervened once we got them. We got our resin on that. Got some glitter out there, and got little sparklers going, and you know how we work.
They want that shit. Yeah.
I want to make a comment.
Tommy, yeah, go ahead, Jamex.
Tommy touched on to the fact that public art isn't for everybody, and I think it's important to talk about that, because not only is it a bureaucratic nightmare at times, you have to deal with structural issues, engineers, architects. I think we make it work because we are a team put together. Me and Einar deal with different things in the projects. That helps a lot. It's a lot of weight on a single person.
Yeah.
And one thing that's absolutely essential is to stay absolutely flexible at every level, not just artistically, because you are forced to make changes that are uncomfortable to you sometimes. You make a statement and say, well, you're going to need to change that. And we can tell you stories about that in another way. But also structural issues that affect your work. All of a sudden, stuff shows up in a building, it's going to affect your work. And if you're not flexible and have a mechanical mind to deal with those sort of things, you're going to have a hard time. We need to stay flexible the whole time.
But if you don't have a mechanical mind, you shouldn't be doing sculpture to begin with.
Yeah.
Because sculpture is engineering. You have to hold the thing up somehow. And I think that's a good way to start, where people say, I hate talking to engineers. Well, how are you going to hold, how's that not going to come down on somebody?
And, y'all have been really great educators around the country and the world, working in different programs at different institutions. And it's sad to see, like, throwing wheels be cast out of ceramic studios, or welders or metalsmithing materials be thrown to the wayside, and people are working 100% digitally. They never have to deal with physics. And to me, it's like, you don't come into public art if you've never carried the weight of the material you want to use. I mean, I taught a class at the Glassell School of Art before I left Houston, and I think that some of my students were a little heartbroken on day one, because I just said that. I was like, I'm not trying to be hard-nosed on the subject. It isn't for everybody. There's some people that there's a delicacy to it that the public will never be able to appreciate. I mean, depending on whose studio practice we're talking about, right? I mean, I think there's a way people could always evolve into it, but the Jamex's point, flexibility has got to be key. And I think I like to think that I've had to explain my job to so many people, like, how's that a full-time job? I'm like, come walk with me one day and you'll see how it's a full-time job, because you got to trust your public art administrator, public art manager to try to carry some of the load too. And if you have a bad project manager, I mean, it only makes the artist's job more difficult. So I hope that we need to carry our side of it.
And that's totally true. The administrator that you're working with on a project should be there to facilitate and to make the vision of the artwork come out, and also call you out when you're not doing the due diligence on some of the stuff that you are under contract to do, and say, hey, you should supply those drawings, and you need to talk to the architect. But I mean, in a way, the team should be about making the best possible artwork for that place. And if you look at that as the overlying, like that's the goals, then there is no reason why that things shouldn't go relatively well. There's delays, there's the things that you have not, for unforeseen structural things that come up, sure. But again, I think that a good public art administration is also not an easy job to do, because you're trying to talk politicians into funding. You're talking architects into. I mean, sometimes architects. Our dad's an architect. They don't want you to do things to their building. That's their art. So that's all sometimes a very tough sell for them to say, okay, that thing you designed so well, we're going to put this thing over it that's going to shine more than you. And architects don't like it when they don't shine. They're the artists.
We have been very lucky with public art administrators. We have had some excellent ones. And we have had situations where the public art in the cities in the transitional process, which is very difficult. It's their job to give you a heads up on things and to help coach you and help you with things. But ultimately, you're under contract to produce. So if your public art administrator is not helping you out, it is your problem. You signed a contract, and that's a key moment that you have to have a lot of care, and you should also have all contracts reviewed by your attorney, obviously.
There's if we leave this panel with anything, artists aren't typically known for their legal expertise. So hire somebody who's an expert in that field. Don't sign a contract just because you feel like that handshake with that person is good, or you want the budget. Sign it and with knowledge of all the things that are your responsibility, and then that helps you down the road to make sure that you could execute it.
I just wanted to close with one question that might also open up a whole can of worms. But we've talked a lot about the projects. Tommy, you alluded to the proposal process, but we haven't really hit upon that too much in the conversation. So I was just wondering, we have a sort of rare opportunity to look behind that opaque curtain from both sides of what the selection process is. And I was wondering from both sides if you guys have any sort of what's the biggest mistake you ever made? Maybe some good anecdotes. What are one of the killer moves that might have sealed a deal? Or Tommy, from your side, what is a deal killer? What should you never do in a proposal process?
I think I could be pretty quick, because I think the fun parts of it the brothers can discuss. I could talk about kind of the boring stuff to start. Simply follow the rules. If they say this is an RFQ, but you give me an entire proposal, when I'm going over 250 applications, you're not going to be considered. I don't care how awesome the project is, because already you're breaking the rules a little bit. And that is a very good indicator of what you will do. And I love somebody who breaks the rules, don't get me wrong, but just following the instructions in the beginning lead to a better working relationship in the future. But also, it is kind of a black and white thing in some ways. You follow the rules. You see if it's an RFQ, RFP. You apply with the pertinent information that whoever's handling the open call is asking you for, and then try to be on time. I think being on time is always good. Don't call and say, "Oh, I was really busy." That's I get that a lot, where it's the day of and "Can I get it to you next week?" I'm like, no, I don't think that's going to work. So just follow the rules, be on time. But selection panels are, to me, I get excited about them. There's a lot of, because I'll end with this little part, and let the brothers talk about it, is I don't pick the work, right? No single art administrator handling civic money, publicly funded money gets to make that final decision. It's always a group effort. So you get people from the maintenance department, you get curators, you get conservators, different panelists that are in that room. So think about that. Don't ever get your heart broken when you lose too, because it's kind of it's a very unique experience per open call, and you're going to get a different set of eyes always looking at your work. If it's a free open call, which most of them are, and they should be, I think, apply to everything, because then you start learning the nuances of that application process. Because there's not one that's the same, and I've worked in 5 different airports, multiple different city entities from San Antonio to Houston to Seattle, and they're all just little different subtleties. That it's not a nationwide book for public art administration. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what y'all think too, and handling the successes and then the oddities of the public art application.
I think it's really good advice. All selection committees are different, sometimes markedly different. and they all will look at the work being the people who apply with very different lenses. You have to remember that. So you have one failure, try a different one, and it's going to be a very different thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I like to also state is that we went a lot into what a bitch it is to do this type of work, because it is at times. But it is also really wonderful to produce a monumental piece. It's an incredible challenge, and it is so exciting. It's like, you know how glass blowing excites us to do blowing glass personally as artists? It's kind of like that, because it is a set of challenges, but you're also thinking, and you keep your eye on the prize. And it's a very enjoyable process too. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody can figure out how to do it if you get the right advice. So if you think that you can do it, you can do it. But you do need to get the right advice in all the steps of the process, because it can feel daunting, but it's not something that cannot be overcome. And I think I can't state it enough how much fun it has been too. We have to also emphasize that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think you would be in it if you didn't have that kind of gratification at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're making something on a different scale that you probably wouldn't be doing otherwise, and it's certainly different than a show at a gallery that goes up and comes down. The fact that you have captive audience of the people that are going by that space is a very different dynamic than other art processes, and as permanence or semi-permanence, however you want to see it, of it also is wonderful, because I mean, we all go to galleries and art shows and we see our same friends. It's a limited sort of a limited pond. The one real quick thing I wanted to mention story-wise on panels is that we have participated being on a panel, and it was super enlightening process, because you're on the other side of the table, and we got to see like how other people do, and we were surprised about how directives aren't followed. And that's basic. I wanted to vote for the best art, and I didn't vote for the best art proposal because they didn't listen to the directives. And that's sad, because as an artist, I want the best artwork for it. But if I'm given a set of directives, that criteria is like being a judge in a
jury
litigation case. So I think that to me was a very, very enlightening. And it made me feel better about our practice, because I thought we did pretty good, considering that when I watched people do their best, and so I saw the mistakes, and it reinforced things. And so I would recommend for people who are in it to at some point accept it when they get invited to a panel, because not only are you giving back to something, a community that you're part of, but you're also, I think you learn a lot.
And you guys, I have to say, like, your work, studio work, public artwork, museum, gallery work, all of that, I feel like you guys are just incredible human beings as artists. You know what I mean? Like, any art administration, whether you're sitting on the panel or you're on the other side applying, should be happy to be a part of y'all. It's just been a great experience getting to talk with y'all and getting to know your work. And although the work is super fun, and like whether it's the glass blowing or the lenticulars, there's a definite, obvious level of professionalism that a public art administrator, whether it's Pilchuck asking you to come teach, or somewhere in LA asking you to propose to a piece, y'all put in your time, and you've earned all whatever good graces you've gotten in public art. It's well earned.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Echo that more loudly, as sort of mentors of my own throughout my practice. It's been really inspiring to see your practice grow and take on bigger and bigger projects. And I think that's probably a great note to sort of close this conversation on. I would encourage all the viewers to go check out the show at Koplin Del Rio, up at least through the end of the month, I think. And thank you all for sharing your knowledge. We'll definitely be posting your phone numbers for that good advice, Jamex. Just kidding. But no, I think it's a lot of really great words, and hopefully some good guidance to people considering considering the role and the adventure of public art as it continues to evolve. Thanks, guys.
Well, Ben, thanks for setting this up. And I know, I'm new to the Seattle world in a way still, and I look forward to Pilchuck getting back on top and celebrating the 50th.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, great panel. Good to see you, Tommy.
Good to see you guys too.
Can't wait to go back to Pilchuck whenever that is.
2022, baby.
That's right.
Well, take care.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank y'all. See y'all.